The air was thick with fatigue, the kind that settles into the bones and warps the mind. Awie's limbs felt like lead as he stumbled into the cafe, an unremarkable little place wedged between a dry cleaner and an abandoned bookstore on a crooked side street. The doorbell jingled with a sharpness that pierced his temple, a cruel reminder of the migraine pounding at the edges of his vision. His stomach was a hollow knot. He hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. Work had blurred into survival lately, grinding, inescapable, and utterly consuming. His eyes searched for a seat. Just one moment to rest, but his knees betrayed him. They gave out graceless and sudden, like a marionette whose strings had been slashed. The floor rushed up. He didn't hit it. A firm grip around his upper arm stopped the descent. Warm fingers curled around him, steady and strong. The contact lasted only a second, maybe two, but it was enough. Enough for a thin, eerie light to flicker on the stranger's wrist. A faint glow bled from the simple silver band of a bracelet, almost imperceptible in the dim light. Awie's eyes locked onto it, disbelief contorting his exhaustion into sudden rage. "You," he began, his voice hoarse from disuse, trembling with accusation. "No, no, don't tell me it's you. Don't tell me." Fate had the audacity. The man who caught him blinked, startled by the venom in Awie's voice. "Are you okay?" the man asked, soft-spoken but sincere. Awie wrenched his arm away as if burned. "I don't need help from someone like you." His tone sliced like ice. "I won't be some story, some inevitable, cruel little twist." And with that he turned, still limping from the impact his body had almost suffered, and fled the cafe before the man could respond. He didn't see the confusion in the other man's expression, or the way he looked down at the still glowing bracelet with a kind of muted horror. 3 hours later, Awie sat on a cold curb, pant legs soaked in dirty slush, ankles swollen and purple beneath the wrap he'd tried and failed to tighten himself. He hissed as he shifted, trying to stand again. It was no use. He'd made it exactly 2 blocks from the cafe before a misstep on cracked pavement twisted his foot sideways. The nearest clinic was on the other end of the neighborhood. He limped for nearly an hour before collapsing onto the waiting room bench of the very place he had once sworn never to return to. He had no choice. The pain in his ankle had become a screaming, relentless throb, and there was a dangerous darkness nibbling at the edges of his vision again. And then he heard the voice. The same one from earlier, gentler now, familiar. "Take him to room 3. I'll see him." Awie didn't have the strength to argue. He gritted his teeth as a nurse helped him limp behind the frosted glass door. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and lavender air freshener. As he was guided onto the examination table, shame wrapped around him like a second skin. He hadn't even noticed the name on the door when he came in. Of course he hadn't. Renji Sakamoto, D.O., was scrawled in clean letters across the frosted panel. He tried to sit upright when Renji entered the room, but a wave of dizziness forced him to lie back. He stared at the ceiling instead. "I'm not here because of you," Awie said at last, his voice brittle. Renji didn't answer at first. Instead he moved methodically, professional, measured. He knelt beside Awie, adjusting the angle of his leg, and gently rolling up the damp, dirty fabric of his pants. "You don't have to be," Renji replied calmly. "But I'm here because you're in pain." Awie let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Still playing the healer, huh?" Renji looked up at him. Not angry, not defensive, just quietly tired. "You'd rather limp around injured than accept kindness from someone you once knew?" he asked, his voice barely a murmur. Awie didn't answer. Silence stretched between them as Renji focused on the swollen ankle. His hands hovered over the bruised flesh. A shimmer sparked under his fingertips. Faint at first, like static, then more solid, warmth flooding Awie's joint, like golden sunlight beneath skin. The pain dulled immediately. A pressure lifted. And yet, Awie didn't flinch. Renji looked up, eyes searching his face. "You're not running." "No," Awie whispered. "I'm not." His voice was stripped of its usual sharpness. No snarl, no anger, just exhaustion, just surrender. There was something cruel about the calm that followed, like silence after a scream. The magic still shimmered on Renji's skin as he carefully wrapped the brace. His fingers worked with tenderness. Awie remembered all too well, once. A tenderness that had once meant something. Now it just reminded him of everything he'd lost, of everything fate had twisted. You think I wanted this? Aoi asked suddenly. You think I wanted to walk into that cafe and what? Fall at your feet like some pathetic cosmic cliché. Renji's hands paused, but he didn't meet his eyes. I didn't ask for this either, Aoi. And yet here we are. Aoi spat. The room felt too warm now, too tight. The humiliation was suffocating. His pride had been crushed beneath the weight of his own body on a dirty street corner, and now this being treated by the very man whose presence was supposed to have been a closed chapter. Sealed, forgotten, except some things didn't forget. Not bracelets, not magic, not pain. You can go, Aoi said finally. Not looking at him. You've done your good deed. You can pretend this never happened. Renji rose slowly. He looked at Aoi with an expression unreadable, somewhere between regret and quiet fury, but he said nothing, just nodded. As the door clicked shut behind him, Aoi lay back on the sterile paper sheet, eyes fixed on the ceiling, throat burning. For the first time in years, he hadn't run, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like victory. The spirit lantern in Renji's clinic flickered the moment Aoi limped through the doors again. It had been dormant when the elderly came with aching hips and stubborn coughs. It had barely flickered when children howled through throat infections or minor fractures, but now it trembled, like breath caught between silence and grief. It cast long, uncertain shadows across the glass cabinets and white counters, bending the light around them in uneasy pulses. It was only visible from the periphery. Looked too hard and it dimmed. Ignore it, and its glow filled the corners like a secret no one wanted to admit. Aoi hated that he noticed it, hated more that he knew what it meant. Renji stood in the corner of the room, already waiting, his coat sleeves rolled to the elbow, his posture composed, but his face was unreadable. The injury wasn't bad, just a reopening of the already bruised ankle after Aoi had tripped on the uneven slope of the street outside. He'd landed hard, instinct had pulled him toward the clinic again, before pride could redirect him. Now here he was, half limping, half hoping to be turned away. He wasn't. You're lucky, Renji said, gesturing him toward the padded table. No ligament damage. Aoi scoffed. Luck? Is that what you call this? Renji didn't respond. He simply helped Aoi onto the table, brushing away grit from the torn edge of Aoi's pant leg. That small act, the soft clink of tweezers against ceramic, the damp cotton cloth warmed between his hands, was more humiliating than any insult. Aoi's body tensed as Renji knelt to examine the re-injury. That same warmth from before began to radiate again, but this time, something changed. The spirit lantern's light pulsed deep orange, and as Renji's fingertips hovered just above Aoi's ankle, ink, shimmering, otherworldly, began to rise on Aoi's skin. Faint letters formed on his calf like a stain pushed to the surface. The words emerged slowly. Just leave already. I waited until I stopped. Aoi hissed through his teeth, jerking his leg away. What the hell is this? Renji froze, his hands still suspended mid-air. It's nothing. The spirit lantern reacts to memory. Sometimes it lingers in the body longer than we admit. Aoi laughed, sharp, humorless. So now even your clinic is judging me. Great. Renji didn't argue. He resumed cleaning the wound, his voice soft. It's not judgment. It's just truth you didn't want to say out loud. Yeah? Aoi snapped, folding his arms tightly across his chest. And what truth is that? Exactly. That I should have said something, that I should have begged you to stay. Renji didn't look up. You didn't have to beg. Oh, that's rich. Aoi leaned back against the wall, his jaw clenched. You walked, you said nothing, and I was the one left looking like a fool, clinging to something that apparently meant nothing. I never said it meant nothing. Aoi flinched. The ink shifted again. More words burned briefly into his skin before fading. You matter too much. I couldn't think straight around you. Renji finally met his eyes. You always think you were the one left behind. You don't realize how much you scared me, Aoi. Aoi barked a laugh. Scared you? I was a damn catastrophe. You were the star of every future planning committee. I was the idiot skipping class, chewing through my own nerves like they were gum. You think that meant I didn't care? I think it meant you ran. Renji's face darkened. You would have ruined me. Then maybe you should have let me. Aoi snapped, his voice cracking like splintered glass. At least then I wouldn't have spent the last 5 years wondering if I imagined everything. Renji's hands hovered near his skin again. You didn't. The clinic had gone quiet. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to pause. The ink faded as quickly as it had appeared, but the sting of it stayed. Aoi looked down at his ankle, now wrapped in new gauze. Renji's touch had been so careful it was almost painful. You always say you're fine, Renji said, gently lowering the pant leg over the bandage. Aoi didn't respond. His throat burned. I remember, Renji continued, even back then, bleeding from the lip after that fight outside the gym, saying you tripped. You always said you were fine, and I let you. Something in Aoi's chest twisted. Why wouldn't you? You always had someone else to save. No, Renji said. The word quiet but firm. It was always you. Aoi closed his eyes. The clinic felt smaller now, heavier. His body, despite the pain relief, refused to relax. Everything ached in places deeper than muscle. He didn't speak again until Renji stepped away, back to the counter. What is that lantern really? Aoi asked, his voice low. Renji turned. It shows echoes, wounds that haven't healed, grief pretending to be anger, regret pretending to be strength. Aoi forced a bitter smile. Then it should be a bonfire by now. Renji didn't smile back. He just looked at him, really looked. Maybe it's not too late. Aoi rose slowly from the table, wincing as he tested his weight. You think one brace and a little magic are enough to rewrite everything? Renji stepped closer, close enough that the spirit lantern's light flickered between them. No, but maybe it's enough to let you sleep. That night, Aoi dreamed. It was a dream he'd had before. Always the same hallway. Always the same sound of lockers slamming and sneakers skidding on linoleum floors. The clatter of teenage chaos. The hallway of their high school, forever frozen at twilight. But this time was different. This time Aoi didn't walk through the hallway with his head down. This time he didn't storm past the memory of Renji leaning against the lockers, arms crossed, eyes on him. This time he stopped. He turned. Renji looked just the way he had then. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled, the slightest smile tugging at his mouth like he didn't know whether he was allowed to feel it. And for the first time Aoi saw something he hadn't let himself believe before. Fear, not of him, but of what he meant. And behind it something that looked dangerously close to hope. Aoi took a breath. Then for the first time in years, he looked back. The ceiling gave out during the rain. Not a storm, just rain. Just another quiet, miserable evening. Aoi had been lying on his threadbare couch, trying to sleep through the ache in his ankle, the dull hum of a cheap fan, and the memory of Renji's fingers against his skin, when the drywall split open like it had been waiting for an excuse. Water poured in, dirty, cold, relentless. Aoi didn't move for the first minute. He just stared at the soaked patch of ceiling that had betrayed him, watching as plaster and insulation crumbled to the floor. The air turned sour with mold. He could already hear the landlord's excuses, already knew there wouldn't be repairs. Not for someone like him. He packed in silence. The duffel bag was old, fraying along the zipper. It let out a metallic rasp as he pulled it closed. He didn't notice the small koi-shaped charm, faded red enamel with a chipped fin, shimmer faintly as it brushed against his leg. It pulsed once, then again, as if it remembered something. Aoi didn't call anyone. He didn't want to. But there was nowhere else to go. Renji's apartment was quiet when he arrived, soaked to the bone and standing in the hallway, like a kid who'd misjudged the weather. He hadn't even texted ahead, just buzzed the door and waited. Renji didn't ask questions, just opened the door, took one look at Aoi's clothes, and said towels on the bathroom shelf. That was it. No offers, no pity, just a towel. And somehow, that was worse. Aoi didn't speak for hours. He sat at the far end of the couch, refusing the tea Renji had brewed, and kept his back to the kitchen. Renji didn't press. The silence stretched, not comforting, but familiar, like old wounds rubbing against scar tissue. They knew how not to talk. The apartment was sparse, lived in but untouched. Everything had its place. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and ink. A few plants, a small bookshelf, a woven mat with wear on the left side. As if someone always stood there in the same shoes, the same posture, trying to leave but never quite walking out. On the far shelf was a wooden box, locked, polished until the carved lilies along the edges gleamed.
Something about it drew Aoi's eyes. It sat under a frame labeled school. The label was handwritten, slanted. Renji's handwriting. He wasn't snooping. He just opened it. The lid creaked. Inside were notebooks, old ID badges, and photos, yellowed and curled at the edges, but carefully kept. One slipped out when Aoi lifted a page. It was a group shot, spring festival, half the class squinting against sunlight, holding snacks, faces flushed with youth and boredom. But Renji wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at Aoi, and not casually, not glancing. He was looking the way people do when they think they'll never be seen. Not longing, not admiration, just raw helpless focus. Aoi held the photo too long. The corners began to bend in his fingers. You weren't supposed to find that, Renji said from behind him, voice quiet. Aoi turned. You kept it. Renji didn't reply. Aoi held the photo up. You're staring at me. I know. What is this? Renji looked at the box, then at the floor. That was the year I started noticing you. Aoi wanted to laugh, wanted to throw the photo, but he didn't. Instead his voice cracked, splintered like frost under pressure. You noticed me, and you still disappeared. I didn't know how to exist near you. Aoi shook his head. I don't want this. He turned toward the door, but didn't open it. That night he tried to sleep in the guest room. The sheets smelled clean, but foreign. The koi charm on his duffel pulsed again, faint light swimming across its surface like a heartbeat trying to be remembered. Aoi stared at the ceiling, not collapsed, but he still couldn't sleep. His thoughts swam too fast. Then the spiral hit. It was quiet at first, shallow breath, a quickening pulse. His fingers twitched. The cold spread up his arms. Panic crept in, not sudden but steady, like water rising. His body began to tremble. He didn't cry, he just stopped moving. He wasn't sure how long it had been before Renji appeared at the doorway. Not close, not even touching the threshold. Renji sat down across from him, not too near, not too far, cross-legged, calm. He said nothing, he just breathed. One breath, slow, deliberate, then another. Aoi's breath stuttered, then mirrored it, shakily, again, until the rhythm began to return. Aoi's lips parted. You remembered I hate being touched when I'm like this. Renji's eyes softened. I've remembered a lot. The room stayed quiet after that. The storm outside had passed, but it still felt like rain inside Aoi's chest. And from the other room, soft as a sigh, a sound rose. The music box had unlocked. The tune was distant, delicate notes from a melody neither of them remembered, and both of them knew. It only played, legend said, when someone under the roof felt safe again. Aoi said nothing. He didn't move, but he didn't leave. The elevator to the rooftop garden opened with a soft chime, revealing a view that didn't belong to their city. It was too surreal, too ethereal. Strings of pale lanterns hovered above glass-paneled railings, like floating stars, suspended on invisible threads. The entire garden was mirrored, ceiling to floor. Even the planters shimmered. A deliberate design, Renji had explained. The founder believed people could only do honest charity work if they were forced to look at themselves. Aoi had rolled his eyes. Now he couldn't stop watching his own reflection. His reflection looked tired, sharp at the edges. The tailored jacket Renji had shoved onto him didn't help. Too clean, too polished. A borrowed tie hung at an angle he didn't bother fixing. But still he walked beside Renji. He didn't leave. That was something. You dragged me here under false pretenses, Aoi muttered, as they entered the main space. Renji smirked. I said it was a rooftop event. I didn't say you had to enjoy it. And the dress code. I told you to wear black. You told me that 5 minutes before we left. You wore black. Aoi sighed, pulling at the collar. The garden was buzzing with polished laughter, clinking glasses, too much perfume, and too many curated smiles. They didn't belong here. Or maybe Renji did. Aoi wasn't sure anymore. He watched Renji blend into the crowd, like he had been born with that ease. His posture had changed, slightly more formal, but not stiff. A public version of himself, the healer everyone liked, the safe one. And then came the golden-haired doctor, tall, confident, laugh that rang louder than it needed to. The moment he laid eyes on Renji, he moved fast, too fast. His hand landed casually on Renji's forearm, the touch just enough to signal interest without crossing lines. His voice was polished, just the right pitch of warmth. I haven't seen you since the conference in Kyoto, the doctor said, eyes scanning Renji too long. Renji smiled politely. Been busy. Your work always is, but still you could make time for some things. Aoi had walked up just in time to hear that. He stood there, silent, unreadable. Then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. Careful, Aoi said, voice casual, almost lazy. He might mistake that tone for professional curiosity. The doctor turned, visibly caught off guard. Renji gave a warning glance. Aoi ignored it. I'm sorry, the doctor said, blinking. You are. Aoi extended his hand. Aoi, non-doctor, non-impressed. There was a beat of silence. Renji cleared his throat. Aoi staying with me for a bit. Oh, the doctor smiled thinly. House guest, something like that. Aoi, you know how it is. Roof collapses. Fate intervenes. People start breathing in sync. The doctor chuckled awkwardly. Right. Well, Renji, I'll see you around. He vanished into the crowd, with more speed than dignity. Renji exhaled, turning slowly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Renji's eyes softened. You didn't pretend not to care. I don't know how to anymore, Aoi said. They stood in silence. Around them, the mirrored walls reflected everything twice over, every conversation, every movement. But something in the glass caught Aoi's eye. He turned slightly, facing one of the larger mirrors by the trellis arch. Their reflections stood side by side, and then just for a moment, the space between them vanished. The line separating them flickered, like a skipped frame in a film, and instead of two figures, there was one, a single person, a body shaped from both of theirs, standing in the same place, facing the mirror with calm acceptance. Aoi blinked. It was gone. What was Renji was already staring at the mirror too, his expression unreadable. He didn't ask. Neither of them did. Later the crowd thinned. Someone dimmed the lanterns, and a quartet began to play something slow and aching. The kind of music you couldn't fake indifference to. Couples began to drift onto the open glass square, where vines curled along the edges, like reaching fingers. Renji looked at him. Aoi didn't move, but when Renji stepped forward and extended a hand, not with expectation, but with the quiet certainty of someone who'd waited long enough, Aoi took it. They moved slowly, one step at a time, neither graceful nor practiced. The mirrored floor didn't reflect their awkwardness, only the closeness. Every turn, every breath, every pause was captured and repeated by glass. I think I always looked at you like you were my favorite mistake, Renji whispered. I just didn't realize you were the only one I kept making on purpose. Aoi looked up. The stars above the garden blurred with the lights. His hand tightened slightly. I hated you, he whispered. I know, I still do. A little. Renji's voice was quiet. That's okay. Aoi's next words got stuck somewhere between his mouth and his chest. The ache came sharp, but it wasn't new. It was the same ache he'd swallowed during every silent night, every unsent message, every almost. So this time, he leaned in, not desperate, not performative, just close. A simple press of lips against skin, quiet, real. And from somewhere above, the mirrored ceiling held the image in its reflection, not as two people, but one, whole. Finally, the morning light barely touched the apartment. Aoi woke before it could. There was no reason for the silence to feel heavy. It wasn't a fight. Not exactly. Nothing had been spoken with finality. Yet he rose like someone on trial. His hands trembled as he tugged on yesterday's clothes. Renji was still asleep, back turned, breathing steady, peaceful in a way that made something in Aoi recoil. It was too much, too quiet, too safe. He left without a word. The childhood house hadn't changed. That was the worst of it. The gate still groaned when it opened. The path still cracked beneath the weight of feet, weeds curling between the stones. The paint was still peeling at the same corner of the porch, revealing splinters that had once bloodied his palms. Aoi stepped into the past like a ghost, stepping into his own grave. The front door was unlocked. Inside the air was stale, soft with rot, sweet with dust. It smelled like grief left out in the sun too long. The floorboards creaked in the same places. The hallway, long and narrow, seemed to breathe beneath his feet. He passed the living room. The cracked mirror still hung above the fireplace, untouched. A single photograph still faced outward on the shelf. His younger self, frozen in plastic, with a half smile, and eyes already learning how to brace for disappointment. The whispers began. By the time he reached the back stairs, they didn't scream, they didn't wail, they murmured, "Coward. You should have stayed gone. You were always the one who left first. He'll see who you are. He'll see everything." Aoi pressed the heel of his hand against his temple, trying to drown them out. The echo beasts weren't malevolent in the traditional sense, just relentless. They lived in places people had fled from, and they lived off memories, feeding on guilt, regret, humiliation like air. The more you listened, the more they remembered. He climbed to the attic. That had been his retreat as a kid, his hiding place, the one spot where the house's voice seemed distant. But now, even there, the past coiled like smoke. You don't deserve to be safe. Aoi curled up near the broken window. His ankle throbbed, half-healed and punishing him for running. His breath caught on every inhale. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the shame of knowing he couldn't even enjoy the one night of peace he'd had without unraveling. The stairs creaked. At first he thought it was the house playing tricks, but the rhythm was steady, intentional, one foot after the other. Renji. He appeared in the doorway, soaked in dust and light, eyes unreadable. "How did you know I came here?" Aoi asked, his voice hollow. "I didn't," Renji said. "I just kept walking toward the part of the city that hurt the most." Aoi didn't answer. He looked away. Renji stepped into the room, slow and cautious. The echo beasts stirred. "You ran. You always run. He'll leave too. They all do." Renji heard them. He shivered slightly, but he didn't stop. Aoi's voice cracked. "It wasn't what you said last night. It was what you did." Renji paused. "You protected me," Aoi whispered. "When I panicked, when I broke like I always do. You didn't touch me, didn't tell me to breathe. You just sat with me, and I didn't know how to live with that, with being seen and not abandoned. I saw you back then too," Renji said, quiet. "I didn't know how to need someone. I still don't." The silence hung thick. Then Renji held out a hand. Not forcing, not demanding, just offering. Aoi stared at it, then took it. They sat on the porch, as the sun began to bleed into twilight. The echo beasts whispered faintly from within the house, but their voices had softened, distant now, like a warning already given. Around the two of them, a soft light began to shimmer. It wasn't moonlight, not yet. It was deeper, bluer. A glow without source. It wound gently between their hands, around their shoulders, casting no shadow, warm but not burning. Aoi stared at it, breath caught. "Is that repentance magic?" Renji said. "Old rare. It only appears when two people share guilt, and neither blames the other anymore." Aoi exhaled. His shoulders sagged. The light grew brighter. "I don't want to run anymore," he whispered. "Then don't," Renji said. Aoi nodded. "Once. Not as a promise, but as a beginning." Inside, the echo beasts fell silent for the first time in years.
The first vending machine sat just outside the gas station, humming softly in the afternoon heat, like it had something to say but didn't want to interrupt the moment. Aoi stood in front of it, staring blankly at rows of colorful cans, his reflection warped slightly in the plexiglass. Renji leaned against the passenger door of the borrowed car, arms crossed, watching the indecision unfold. "You've been staring at the lemon soda for 5 minutes," Renji said. "Is it judging you?" "It blinked at me," Aoi muttered. Renji walked over, slapped 2 coins into the machine, and hit the button without asking. The can clunked down with theatrical finality. "Coward," Aoi said. "You're welcome." They had been driving for hours, but neither of them seemed eager to return. The city could wait. Reality could wait. The road curled around sleepy hills and broken fences, the kind of place where everything was slightly cracked but beautifully so, like them. Renji reached into the glove box and pulled out something small. Aoi didn't notice until the object was placed quietly into his palm. A silver key. He looked up. "There's a sigil on it," Renji said. "Not complicated, just a locator rune." Aoi ran a thumb across the inscription. It glowed faintly under his touch, like memory waking up. Renji continued. "It only opens one place, wherever you feel like you belong." Aoi didn't speak for a long time. He stared at the key like it might burn through his skin. It didn't. It pulsed, warm and gentle, as if it had been waiting a long time for his hand. He closed his fingers around it. The picnic wasn't planned. Nothing between them ever really was. They found a stretch of grass just off the edge of a cliff, overlooking the bay. Wind tore at the paper lunchboxes they bought at a convenience store. Aoi cursed at a napkin trying to take flight, and Renji caught it without looking. The sky was all bruised blue and pale fire. The sea below hissed softly, like a lullaby made of salt. Renji pulled out a silver chain, small, unadorned, except for the charm. A tiny bridge, intricately detailed, no longer than a fingertip. The slats were etched with precision, its arches curved like someone had built it to cross something impossible. I know you've burned a lot of bridges, Renji said, but I kept this one. Aoi's breath caught. The air tasted like memory. Renji reached up, holding the chain gently, waiting. Aoi didn't stop him. He tilted his head, just slightly. The charm settled against his chest, and for the first time, Aoi didn't flinch at being seen. So, he whispered, let's cross it, together. Renji nodded. Until it's not a bridge anymore, just the road under our feet. The morning after the storm came soft and silver. Aoi woke first. The new apartment smelled like sleep and coffee, and something almost like peace. He stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring water into the kettle, the bridge charm cool against his chest. Renji appeared in the doorway, like he'd always belonged there, quiet, barefoot, eyes still full of sleep. He walked up behind Aoi and pressed a kiss to his shoulder. Nothing showy, nothing performative, just there, solid. You do that thing, Renji murmured, where you look at me like you're afraid I'll disappear. Aoi didn't turn. No, he said. I'm memorizing you. Later, as twilight melted into dusk, they stepped onto the small balcony. A breeze lifted from the street below, carrying the smells of the evening, the bite of pavement, the sweetness of something baking, the breath of jasmine from a neighbor's windowsill. A single paper lantern floated into view. Someone from a nearby building had let it go. It hovered outside their railing for just a moment, its flame steady. On its side, painted in ink that shimmered faintly in the breeze, was a single kanji. Lo, stay. Renji reached over and took Aoi's hand. Their fingers threaded together, neither one hesitating. Their pendants hummed in unison. The jade thread around Renji's neck pulsed once, responding to the faint glow of Aoi's bridge charm, like they were tuning to each other. I burned every bridge between us, Aoi whispered, voice low. Renji leaned in, resting his forehead against Aoi's. Not pushing, just there. And I walked through the smoke, he said. To find you.